Hello, this is Ram Mohan. I am working as head of Electronics and Communications Department, presently placed at Government Polytechnic, Mahabubnagar. The subject we are looking into is Basic Electrical and Electronics. The topic is Semiconductor Diode. In this current session, we will be looking into the subtopic of classification of semiconductors. Let us recap what we have been learning all this time. Well, we have discussed about the energy bands in the conductors, insulators, and semiconductors. And also, we have seen the valence band and the conduction band. We have also discussed about the presence of forbidden energy gap in the materials. Now, let us see the objectives of our current session. So, on the completion of this video session, you will be able to understand the intrinsic semiconductor, then extrinsic semiconductor, then we'll also be able to understand the differences between the intrinsic and the extrinsic semiconductors. Now let us see the different types of semiconductors that can be available. Okay, so now the semiconductors can be classified into intrinsic semiconductor. They are also known as pure semiconductor. Now the other type available is extrinsic semiconductor, as also known as the doped semiconductor, or it is an impure semiconductor. The extrinsic semiconductors are further classified as, let us see what they are further classified as: N-type semiconductors and P-type semiconductors. That means semiconductors are basically of two types, that is pure and impure. And in the impure we have another again two classifications, that is N-type and P-type of semiconductors. Now let us see about the intrinsic semiconductor. So this is the molecular structure of the semiconductor, which is a intrinsic means what? It's a pure type of semiconductor. So here we'll see there is a hole, because in this particular type of materials of semiconductors we will be saving covalent bonds. So there will be balance, but there will be, the materials are normally balanced, because when it has to be stable, the it has to be at neutral state. So you can also see a hole and an electron. So that's a free electron. So the semiconductor in pure form is known as an intrinsic semiconductor, or it is a pure one. So the examples are germanium and pure silicon. At room temperature, the number of electrons will be equal to the number of the holes in a material of a pure semiconductor. Hence, that is neutral and they does not conduct any electricity, or there is no flow of electrons. So it rather acts like an insulator. Now Let us look into the Fermi levels in a semiconductor. Fermi level is a term that is used to describe the top of the collection of electron energy levels at absolute zero temperature. Okay, so absolute zero is nothing but 0 degrees Kelvin, or it is also indicated as minus 273 degrees centigrade. Okay, so it is referring to the top of the band of collection of electron energy levels that we have discussed previously. Right? Now, the Fermi level plays an important role in the band theory of solids. Fine. In doped semiconductors, the p type and the n type, the Fermi level is shifted by the impurities. So we'll see what these doped semiconductors are, and we'll be looking into the details of this in the next few minutes. The intrinsic semiconductor energy band diagram. Okay, now we are actually going to see the energy band diagram for a intrinsic semiconductor. That means our pure semiconductor. So that is the valency band with the carriers or the holes in that. Now this is the conduction band, and let us see where this Fermi level is. Where should it be? Can you guess? So we have discussed that in a pure one, the number of electrons is equal to number of electrons, and this Fermi level lies in the middle of the both conduction and the valency band, and that is called as the Fermi level. And we should remember always that the Fermi level lies in the middle of the two bands, that is conduction and valence bands, and this is for a intrinsic or a pure semiconductor material. Now let us see the Fermi level in a extrinsic semiconductor. When we add an impurity to a pure semiconductor to increase the charge carriers, then it becomes an extrinsic semiconductor. Okay, so because a pure semiconductor is rather useless, it acts like an insulator, but it can be made to very usable form by adding some impurities. So that's what we are actually discussing about, the adding of impurities to a pure semiconductor. So by the process of adding impurities, we are actually trying to increase the charged carriers present in that particular materials. Okay, now the extrinsic semiconductors are also known as the doped semiconductors. Now what is this process supposed to be? So we will be having a process of adding impurities to the pure semiconductor. So here the process of adding impurities to an intrinsic semiconductor is called as doping. Now let us see the energy bar diagram of a p-type semiconductor. So we are assuming that this is the first form we have actually brought out by adding a impurity. So here comes the energy band diagram for a p-type semiconductor. So what is this one? At the lowest level it is the valency band. Now above that is the conduction band. And where is the Fermi level? So when you look at this, the Fermi level is lying very close to the valence band here. So this is for p type of semiconductor material. So we should remember always that the Fermi level lies very near to the valency band in case of a p type of semiconductor material. Well, let us see the next one. So the energy band diagram for a semiconductor material which is converted to n type. Yes. So here comes the energy level diagram for the n type of material. This is the valence band, and this is the conduction band. And where is the Fermi level? We could see that the Fermi level is standing very close to the conduction band. So we should always remember this point as well for n type of material. That means the Fermi level lies very near to the conduction band in a n type of semiconductor material. Now let us study about the impurities that will be added to make pure into impure, that is an extrinsic semiconductor. Fine. So the pentavalent impurity atoms with 5 valence electrons produce a n type of semiconductor by contributing extra electrons. So that means we are going to add a pentavalent impurity to a pure semiconductor to make it impure, and the resulting impurity is having excess of electrons. So let us see what are the impurities that contribute in the pentavalent form. So the impurities such as antimony, arsenic and phosphorus are pentavalent materials. So these are the materials normally used in the process of preparing a n type of semiconductor. Now the trivalent impurities atoms with the 3 valence electrons produce a p type of semiconductor by contributing extra holes. That means this is having a deficiency of electrons, which is normally referred to as the presence of hole. Okay, so let us see what are the materials that are actually used to get this type of material, that is p type. So the impurities such as boron, aluminium and gallium are trivalent, which are used to add the pure semiconductor, resulting in a p type of semiconductor. P in the sense having more holes, that means deficiency of electrons. Now let us see the comparison of semiconductors. What are the two types we have? They are intrinsic semiconductor and extrinsic semiconductor. So we know that intrinsic semiconductor is in a pure form. What about intrinsic? Extrinsic? It is a formed by adding trivalent or pentavalent. So the impurity is added to a pure semiconductor, so making it a impure one. So that is referred as extrinsic semiconductor. Now next one is holes and electrons are equal in a pure semiconductor. Then what about the extrinsic semiconductor? Here the number of holes are more in a p-type of material and the number of electrons are more in an n-type of material. Now the Fermi level for the intrinsic semiconductor lies in between the valency and the conduction bands. So do you remember the figure? It is in the middle of the both conduction and valency bands. Now whereas in the Fermi level for semiconductor that is in the impure form, that means we have two types, that is p-type and n-type. Here the Fermi level lies near the valence band in the p-type and it lies near the conduction band in a n-type of material. Now the ratio of majority and the minority carriers is unity. That is for a pure semiconductor, because we have been telling that the number of holes is equal to number of electrons. Whereas in an impure, we are trying to make them imbalance intentionally. So the ratio of majority and the minority carriers is not unity, definitely. It has to be greater than 1. Intentionally we make it high. That means the majority carriers will be more and the minority carriers will be less. Okay. Now let us summarize what all we have been learning in this session. So we have discussed about the intrinsic and the extrinsic semiconductor, pure and the impure semiconductor, and then we have also understood about the Fermi level pure material and Fermi level in impure. In that is in both the n type of material and the p type of materials. Now we have also discussed about the comparison between the both types of materials, that is pure and impure. Now let us have some quiz on the topic we have been discussing all this while. The ratio of majority and the minority carriers in an intrinsic semiconductor is choice A unity, choice B is greater than unity, choice C is less than unity, choice D you don't have, and what is the answer? It is unity. So the intrinsic means a pure one, so we have been discussing that pure will have both equal electrons and holes to be in equal number. Let us see the next one. What are the impurities added to the p materials? That means, so that we have to name the material or the impurity that is added to a pure one to result a p type of semiconductor. A trivalent, B tetravalent, then C is pentavalent. What's the answer? It is trivalent. Trivalent means 3. And the next one. The Fermi level in a p type of semiconductor lies where it has to be. It has to be close to valency or the conduction. A is near the conduction band, choice A. Choice B is near the valence band, and choice C is in the middle of the conduction and the valence bands. What's the right answer? B. It lies near the valence band. Next one is minority carriers in the p type is electrons, holes, electrons. Because P itself means positively charged, that means the majority carriers are holes. Now let us see the frequently asked questions. Number one, distinguish between intrinsic and extrinsic semiconductor and compare between N type of materials and P type of materials.